Ready.
Okay. All right. Welcome to How to Start an Effective Podcast. I'm your host, Corinne Shalvoy. That's how you start an effective podcast. Just kidding. I'm your moderator and a wannabe podcaster. These guys are all pro podcasters here. So, we want to start with some personal introductions. We have some awesome people here, all in different phases of their podcasting journey. I'll start with our virtual attendees. Eric, if you could give us a quick intro, that'd be awesome.
Sure. My name's Eric Manning. I'm the founder and host of the Trail Manners podcast. We started in 2015, recorded 300 plus shows, just enjoy what we do. Took a little time off through COVID and a few life changes, but we're back. And professionally, since this is such a great hobby, professionally, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit here in Utah, the Trails Foundation, Northern Utah. We build, maintain, and keep open spaces. So, yeah. And it's a pleasure to be here. Honored.
Great, thank you. All right, Mr. Scott Ward.
I'll echo Eric's comments. It's a pleasure to be here. I co-host a podcast with one of my best friends, Don Freeman, longtime trail runners. We've been doing podcasts since 2011 when we first found out what a podcast was. This week, we are publishing our 700th episode. We've been very consistent. I wish my trail running was as consistent as our podcasting streak, but we enjoy it. We learn a ton from our wonderful guests, and hopefully we can communicate some of those golden nuggets to the people that listen to our podcast. Oh, and it's called Trail Runner Nation, by the way. I didn't mention that. Sorry.
Yeah. One of the first trail running podcasts I ever listened to, and I still listen to this day. Amy.
Hi, my name is Amy Kohler. I first and foremost am a race director, like all of you guys. I own a sustainable running company. We host climate neutral events. And this year I started a podcast. It's called the Running Kind Podcast. We are very much in our early phases. We right now produce a weekly episode linking sustainability and trail running.
And I'll plug my podcast because I started this year as well. And it is just myself and a good friend of mine. We are both major running nerds and wanted to provide kind of evergreen resources about some of the most important races out there. So we talk, it's called Ultra Uncovered. We talk in the first half of the podcast in depth about what you need to know about a race. For example, Black Canyon, we've done the Pikes Peak Marathon, we've done, we just did Javelina. So anyone who's interested in the effort to continue to provide resources for people coming into the sport, what's it going to be all about when you jump on the start line of this? But more than what's just on the website. What are you going to experience weather-wise? What's under your feet? How should you be training? Things like that. And then the second half, we talk to someone who has done the race, maybe a front runner, maybe someone in the back of the pack, and we get their firsthand experience. So our goal in doing it is just to create these resources for people when they are researching the races they want to do to be able to understand if it's going to be a great fit for them. So that's that. And so, yeah, we'll dive into some questions here. So kind of wanted to start a little bit with, and this is mostly a race director audience. From that standpoint, what are some of the benefits that you all see in creating a podcast? So we just had the live stream panel, and a big theme there was marketing, right? It is marketing for your race. So we do have some podcasts in here. There's the Hard Talk podcast, around hard rock. But what are some of the benefits that you all might see in creating a podcast? We'll start with you, Scott. Scott, you want to go first?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear my name. So the value of creating a podcast, it's all selfish. It's selfish. When we started this our podcast back in 2011, Don and I we were actually out on a trail run, where most of our good ideas come from, and we said, we've benefited quite a bit from the OGs that came before us that taught us, hey, you don't have to run those hills. You can actually walk them. Or how much electrolyte do I need to take? Or how do I pace myself in a long run? And we were thinking, boy, there's probably, we're in this tiny little community in Northern California. There's probably a lot more information out there that we could glean and maybe share to newer trail runners. We knew that trail running was on an incline. As your race directors that are paying attention to this episode or this session know that trail running has just grown leaps and bounds. And there's a lot of new trail runners that came into the sport and are still coming in. And we thought, if we could take these wisdom nuggets and share them with those who want to learn how to be a better trail runner and be part of our community, that's what we wanted to do. And that's really how it started, and how we've continued to do it all these years. Don and I have been running for a long time. Don longer than me, and we still learn every single episode. In fact, we joke when we finish hitting the record button, we both look at each other and go, that was the best episode yet, because we just have such great guests.
Eric, you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to echo basically everything he just said. Definitely got into it for the selfish reasons, to talk to amazing people, hear their incredible stories, and share their stories more than anything. And it doesn't always come down to the quote unquote elite athletes. It's your, everyday runner, the professional worker, the parents, whatever that looks like. But on a race directing side, I think one of the benefits we found for some of the race directors is, podcasts, whether you like it or not, they almost live forever. Magazines and ads and everything else, they come and go, they get, moved around. And with a podcast, you can kind of put your personal touch on everything. So if you do have a race, you can, put yourself there. You can not just market the race, but market who you are, kind of sell the vibe of your race, what it's all about, get people on that have run the course. And I think that's one of the big benefits is, more and more people, unfortunately, probably aren't reading as much magazine articles. There's still a few people out there, but people are on their commute or on their run, and they're listening to podcasts. Right. They're, cutting them off here and there. They can save them for later, but they live forever. And I only speaking for mine for sure, but we've had people after 4 or 5 years go, oh yeah, I heard about this race through, your podcast 4 years ago. So I think that's one of the benefits on the race directing side. For podcasting is just that emotional part of it.
Yeah.
I would say when I started the podcast, I started it in April of this year. So like I said, it's fairly new. I really wanted to create a space that not only people who are attending my events can go to learn more about linking sustainability and running, but also a space and a forum for people that maybe are not super involved in the running community, but are passionate about sustainability, or just trying to engage the community and expand the community that I know in a larger way. And of course, yes, like bringing on guests every week. I don't have a co-host, so it is just me. And talking to different runners is certainly an amazing networking opportunity, talking to different brands and expanding in that way, just to get on the phone or get on a screen with someone for an hour and talk about running or, climate action in the trail running world is really a great networking opportunity as a race director as well.
All right, so get into some of the nitty gritty here. I guess actually, is there anyone in this room who is interested in starting a podcast?
Me.
Okay, we've got like 4 or 5. Is there anybody else? I know there's a few people who already have podcasts existing. Raise your hand. Yeah, a couple. Okay, cool. So at least we have some people who are interested in what we're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about like the specifics of it. starting with platforms, we just did live streaming and we talked about the platforms being used. I know when I started this whole journey, I was like, I just reached out to some people I knew doing podcasts and said, what do you use? And therefore that's what I use. So we'll do quick rapid fire. What do you guys use to record your podcast? I use Riverside.
I use Google Meet.
Eric?
Man, we're trying to get into the next century, so we're looking StreamYard for video, but everything's audio.
We also use Riverside.
Okay, all right. Mike, you have a mic that you use? I think I use a Yeti Blue, I think.
Broadcast.
Eric, Mike?
I use the Shure MV7.
That looks expensive.
It didn't start that way.
You know, I have a garage full of mics, so I'm like, like Eric, we've gone through them all. The one that has just performed amazing for us, it is expensive, is the Shure. I'm actually looking at it. It's the SM7B.
Sure.
But I will say the Yeti microphones are a very great economical solution.
Yeah, they're like, I don't know, they're like $80.
Yeah, they're a great solution. I have 3 of them behind me.
Awesome. Okay. So that kind of leads into costs associated with starting a podcast. Any other basic equipment that you guys would recommend, or thoughts to get people set up for success if they're just getting started? Let's start with here.
I think it really just comes down to what you want to do with it. When I first started, we did it out of my 1978 Volkswagen bus. And so we had portable equipment. My microphone was $39. It was really top of the line. It was pretty solid plastic. But I think it really depends on what you want to do. If you have a portable setup, if you have a home studio, if you have both. But if you're going to start one, play around a little bit. I like to tell people, start basic. Don't overwhelm yourself too early with all the gadgets and gizmos and mixer boards and everything else. Just make sure it's something you're going to enjoy. And trust me, there's stuff coming out. It seems like every week that's new technology that you're going to want. So just get it off the ground and you'll find your way.
I agree. You can get into podcasting actually super, super economically now. Most everybody has a mobile device, and just the simple Apple wired earbuds have remarkable sound, and you can use a lot of the platforms like Riverside or Acast and some of the others have a mobile app, and you can record it on your phone. So you don't even need to buy a computer or have a computer. So it's very inexpensive to do that. If you get into it and you think that this is going to be an ongoing concern, I've always said that if you want to get into a new sport, it's going to cost you $1,000. I would say that's, if you want to get good audio gear, it's probably $1,000. But you could get into it very, very inexpensive, almost, cheap, almost free. That's why there's so many podcasts out there, right? Everybody can start a podcast.
Amy, from your perspective, what was the most important thing, or what research did you do when you were like, I want to start this thing? How do I get going? What was your journey to start?
I called the assessment.
Yes. Okay.
I chose Google Drive because I needed the space for other instructor things. So I store all of our event photos and everything on there anyway. So all of our videos, most of the guests I have are virtual. So we just record through that, and that is about $100 for a terabyte, which is an insane amount of storage. And then I just pull the audio from those videos. I do have the little Rode mics, and they're great. They're great not only for podcasting, like I bring them to races and we'll do post-race interviews with people. They're also just great for marketing, like videos when you want good audio quality at your events or before your events. If you're out running on the trail and you want your audio to be good as you're approaching the camera, You could be talking while you're recording that. So for me, it was, what can I get that I get the most use out of? A resource we were using early on was a college recording studio. So a lot of local universities have free podcasting studios now. It seems crazy, but you can reserve the space sometimes and go in and have a full, studio and feel like a professional and have in-person interviews at a really high quality sound. So yeah, I mean, I would say probably I probably spend about $500 to start the podcast with decent equipment and a good bit of storage, and that was what I could put out in hopes that it brings people to my events and promotes what I'm trying to do.
All right, this question was not given to the panelists ahead of time, so sorry for the impromptu, but especially to Eric and Scott, you guys have very successful, long-standing podcasts. Is there something that you advise somebody starting out, just things that you think have led to being able to have it going so long? There's so many that just, they go away very quickly. So anything that you've learned in your podcasting journeys that you think is important for somebody to understand? And I'm kind of thinking about the consistency, and we're trail runners, so we know how to train consistently and that kind of thing. But what else would you advise in terms of just how you've been successful over many years?
Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, great. I got to go first. Realistically I think you need to do it for the right reason. I know that seems cliche and everything else, but when we started, we weren't in it to make any money. We just wanted to, we were trail and ultra runners. We loved the community. So I like to think we did it for the right reasons. And then, as biggest testament to Scott, the consistency is huge. I know for us, a few years we were 2 shows a week. Was fantastic. But consistency is big, and don't take yourself too seriously. There's a lot of podcasts out there. Find your own, your own way of doing it. Don't worry about copying or who's doing what. I mean, realistically, sitting here with Scott, they're the gold standard in the trail running world, to be honest with you. And if you tried to come out and say, oh, we're going to be like Trail Runner Nation, you're probably going to have a rough go. But if you just come out and say, I'm going to have this form and this and that, I think you'll be successful. But you got to love it. You really have to do it for the right reasons and just be authentic in everything you do. I think people nowadays can tell when you're not authentic or doing it for the wrong reasons. And that's a surefire way of just not being successful. And just have fun. I mean, that's the key. Have fun.
Yeah, I'd echo everything that Eric said. I will say one thing that my co-host partner, Don, was just hammering early on is we have to release an episode every Friday morning. And sometimes it would be Thursday night and we wouldn't have anything recorded. And I go, yeah, let's just skip this week. It's okay. Nobody will care. And he goes, no, we have to have an episode. And so we forced ourselves. If you go way back in our archive, there's some pretty lame episodes that we did, but the point is we were consistent with our effort. Our audience knew that Friday a new episode dropped, and so they could count on us. And I think that that's important. The other thing, the last time I looked, I think there's 3.2 million or billion. I don't know. I get B's and M's mixed up. There's a lot of podcasts out there now. And to get recognized, even in the trail running community, we were very lucky because we were one of the first podcasts with about trail and ultra running. And so people gravitated to us because we were the only one out there. Now there's hundreds, if not thousands of podcasts that deal with trail and ultra running. You need to find a niche that you're going to focus on. Like Eric said, our niche is very specific. When Don and I started, we read a book by Simon Sinek that was called Start With Why. And Don and I were very clear about the reason why we were doing this. And it was to help runners become better runners and maybe become better human beings. because of their running. And that's what it has been. We are not an ESPN. We don't just interview the elite runners. And there's a lot of different niches. I just came across a podcast on trail running that is, you should go check them out. It's called Scared Running, and it's scary stories that are on the trail. I mean, that's a niche. No one else was, I don't know any other podcasts are doing that. So find a niche, be consistent, and like Eric said, you got to have fun. Don't have any economical expectations, because you're doing it for yourself and for maybe some other people that may get some good out of it.
But we're gonna go on to, okay, just thinking a little bit about how do you guys think your podcast kind of can, like, will help people come into the sport? And I think I am very familiar with Trail Runner Nation, not as familiar with yours, Eric. Gotta listen to yours. We're gonna do a crosscast. This is coming. But yeah, so tell us about how you think that brings people into the, just a little bit about, I guess, your podcast, how you think it will bring other folks into the sport of trail running. Eric?
I think the biggest thing is just trying to let people know that, you don't have to be special. You can just put on a pair of shoes, find the wrong friends because they're going to lead you down the wrong path. But it's, as Scott mentioned, some of our biggest episodes were just people that had great stories. Someone that lost a lot of weight through trail running, someone that fought some of their demons through trail running, some people that found their group through trail running. And I think people that listen want to hear stories that relate to them. We all can't relate to these elite athletes. I wish we could. Trust me, I've tried it. It doesn't work for me, but you can relate to other people. So it shows that this sport that we all love so much and are passionate and care about, that it really is inclusive. And I think if you can tell the right story, you never know who's listening. And, that's probably some of the greatest memories I have of doing the podcast, is just some messages from people that you don't know listen, that say, hey, this episode with this person helped me do something, right? And I think at the end of the day, I could take that one comment and say, okay, this X amount of years was worth it based on one comment. So by telling stories, people sometimes get a little emotional. I'm one of those guys. You can tell, and I think that's the beauty of it. You don't have to be special to do any of this trail and ultra running business. You just need some sketchy friends and a pair of shoes. Sometimes people only wear those. So I think that's probably one of the best things.
I think that I love that. I found that there's a lot of fear for people that are thinking about getting into trail running. They may be a 5K or 10K or a road runner, and they think they hear about trail running and they go, oh man, I'd love to do that, but I'm scared of snakes, and I'm afraid to get lost. I don't know the trails. And I think that what we try to do on our podcast is eliminate the fear or those obstacles to get into it. Your race directors that are there, I will tell you, they see it probably every single day that they're producing their races, and that is when you. I think sometimes we have an idea of what a runner should look like, or how fast they should run, and you go to a trail race and you see every shape, size, color, whatever of person. And so, like Eric said, it's inclusive, but it's also approachable. Anybody can trail run. And, just the little trail head that I go up to and run, every day. I'm surprised sometimes. I go, boy, they shouldn't be out here. And then I think, of course they should. Why shouldn't they be out here? So I think in our podcast, we try to eliminate the things that are causing fear and make it more approachable.
A lot of people who care about sustainability are in these communities. So we hope for bringing people into work kind of podcast, or maybe tapping into people, like you said, that are more interested in sustainability, but that introducing them to.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, to be completely that sustainability is kind of it's kind of a word that we throw out there that sometimes doesn't actually hold the weight that we intended to hold. And so I love what you guys are doing in bringing new runners into the trail running space. And I haven't had that focus as much with what I'm trying to do with the Running Kind or the Running Kind podcast. And so, yeah, I mean, the goal is that like, I get people that come to my races that are focused on making a impact or less of a footprint in that, you know, sense. And then the people that come to our races just because they're a race, maybe are interested and listen to the podcast and are like, oh, I didn't know what a carbon offset was, or I didn't know that trail running could have a, you know, positive impact on the grounds that we're running on. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the goal for me, is like hoping to connect the dots for people that haven't connected them yet, that like we're spending all this time together. And, you know, not every guest I have is an expert in sustainability. I do love geeking out with some, you know, top women in the sport. And so I try to balance the focus on sustainability and the focus on climate action with the balance of like, it is good variety to have different people, different backgrounds, and different levels of sport, especially women in sport, to discuss those issues.
Okay, I need to know where the Running Kind came from. Can we hear the story of the name?
Yeah, so I initially was going to name the business The Long Run, which is a name of one of my races. But I did a Google search for songs about that. The Running Kind was one by Jen. And I was like, that's the winner. Here we are.
I think I've heard it on the podcast, but Scott, how'd you come up with the name of your podcast?
What was that?
How did you guys come up with the name Trail Runner Nation? I've heard you say it on the podcast, but not everybody may know. So how'd you come up with it?
Well, it's actually, you know, Don and I are not the smartest tools in the shed. We live in Northern California, and Don's an Oakland Raider fan. And if you know about the Oakland Raiders, they have the Raider Nation. So there's a little bit of plagiarism involved in our name, and of course, Trail Runner, that was really hard for us to come up with. So not a real creative name, but it's descriptive. We felt that we wanted to create a community that was very passionate, and that's what the Raider Nation is. They're very passionate fans. And we felt that it kind of communicated the passion that we had for trail running, and hopefully the people that listen are included in that passionate community.
Yeah, I think you're undercutting how good it is. It's actually really solid name, but it's awesome. So Eric, how'd you come up with your name?
I wish I had a better story, to be honest with you. My nickname is Manners. That's what everybody calls me. And when this social media platform called Instagram came out, I just grabbed Trail Manners as my handle because Manners was taken. And my best friend that started this podcast with me, Joel Hatch, when we decided to do it, started off like, what should we name the podcast? He goes, I don't know, just name it Trail Manners. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of hokey. I don't know about that, but it stuck. So that's where we are. So nothing fancy.
Okay, any questions for these three? We have time for a couple questions if anyone's curious about anything in the podcast.
I have a comment while people are thinking about their question.
Yeah,
one of the things that has changed that Don and I are still trying to adopt, because you know we're not social media giants. If you're starting a podcast in trail running, it's a very, very crowded space. So you have to find your niche. You have to, be specific. But you have to think about how are you going to grow your audience, and you have to use all that social media stuff out there. YouTube right now, is the number one streaming platform for podcasts. It's not for our podcast, but that's where most people listen to podcasts is on YouTube. So as you're thinking about this, doing the short little reels for Instagram and X and Facebook, for YouTube, that's where you're going to get discovered. That's where people are going to find you, is on YouTube. I think YouTube is now the second largest search engine behind Google. So, I would encourage you to try to use those platforms. As Corinne knows, Riverside is a platform. I'm sure all the others do the same thing, but they've made it very, very easy for you to make those short clips and the YouTube video content. So I think that if I was starting a new podcast, you have to be using those platforms. You can't just put it out on Spotify and Apple and just hope that you're going to get discovered.
Great point. Okay, Rob, you want to come up and ask the question right into that mic? Rob Palmore has a question.
Hey guys, I'm Rob Palmore. I had a quick question. Admittedly, I'm not a big listener to podcasts, unfortunately, but I guess I might have to try more. I have given it a try on a couple occasions. I've noticed sometimes when, the couple that I've listened to, you might have a few episodes and then they go dark and they don't come back. So, and I don't know if people have started podcasts and then found it to be unsuccessful and then change their subject or they, find another niche. But for you guys, how do you know, at what point do you say, okay, well, we tried and maybe it wasn't that successful, we do something else? Or what signals did you receive, to build your confidence to continue on or to somehow, make some directional changes?
Scott's got to start this one.
Well, I will tell you, over 13 years, we've had a lot of redirections. I mentioned that Don and I have a very specific and crystal why of why we're doing this. And sometimes because we've taken bad advice here and there, we've gone off and away from that why, and it's become very, very difficult. Once we got back to the why, it became very easy. Most podcasts, I think I've looked at statistics. Most podcasts out there fail after about 20 episodes. So, I don't know if all of the race directors that are listening to this are ultra trail race directors,
No,
but
variety.
so it's one foot in front of the other. You may think that you want to stop and your stomach is upset and your legs are cramping, but you still got to say, okay, I need to take one more step. I need to get to that next aid station. I need to do one more episode. And once you push yourself like that, use that kind of as a metaphor to keep going. If you're judging yourself on downloads, you're probably going to fail. That's not the reason why you should be doing a podcast. Those will come, hopefully. So I would say, if you're having fun, Eric brought this up at the very beginning. If you're doing it and you're having fun, then there's no reason to stop. If it becomes a job and something that you don't enjoy, then maybe you should hang it up.
Okay.
So just from a race director standpoint, like one of the things that I really have found beneficial about starting this is I'm not getting thousands of listens per episode, right? Like it's a few hundred listens every episode. And, we've seen a little bit of growth. We have about 30 episodes out. And one thing that I do think is great from a building your brand standpoint or building your race is that it gives you something every week, or if you choose to do it bi-weekly or even monthly, to re-engage with your runners about. So sometimes when we're not in busy race mode or not promoting a specific event, this is a good way to re-engage your runners in what you're doing or what you're working on, or who in your community is doing something awesome that you want to highlight. And yeah, I mean, it's a really easy way to expand the community. Like, you're collaborating with different people. And so naturally every episode you get to share that with another person on Instagram, and that person is sharing it with their followers, and they're learning about your brand.
I'll just jump in there real quick just to give you an idea. I mean, if you're getting, you said 300 downloads per episode, you're in the top 15% of all podcasts. So you're actually doing really, really well. Not all of us are going to be a Joe Rogan where we get, 1.5 million downloads per episode. So that you should also know, Amy, is you're extremely successful. You're in the top 15% of all podcasts. So kind of keep that in your back pocket.
I was there, but I'm friends with Finn Melanson and Joe Corcione. They both have pretty successful podcasts now, but it took a couple years. I know it took at least a couple years for them to grow that audience, and they're also both very good marketers. So I think back to your all's point of just doing it for the right reason, loving doing it. That's just like the most important, and everything else will come. Stick with it. And yeah, to your point, it's like being in front of your customer. If our customers maybe are like the community that we just want to be in touch with, and I just want to reach out to cool people and ask them to come on the podcast, and then that's awesome. So I get to talk to them. But yeah, it's the way to stay in touch with your customer, who essentially is your racer and the community, which all is going to help with your race. So, thank you all. Any last words from Scott or Eric?
I would just say, I'm super thrilled to be here. If you are a race director and you're thinking, yeah, I'd like to start a podcast to help promote my race, I think there's a lot of ways you could do that, and find a niche. You could say, you could have stories of first-time runners that have run their first 15K trail race, and interview them. What were their expectations? How did it turn out? You could have, one of your longtime runners. There's some streakers out there that have run your race 15 years in a row. Get them on and say, okay, what do you like about this race, and how do you execute during this race? And just get people excited about the terrain, about the culture, about the aid stations. You may interview some of your aid station workers and say, why do you do this every year? What's the theme of your aid station this year? There's just a lot of really fun things that I could think of that would help promote your race and get out there instead of, just the 3 months before the race where you're sending out blast emails.
All right. Thank you all so much for lending some wisdom on the podcasting front. Let's hear it for everyone. Trail manners and the running kind, and also uncovered, shameless plug. But thank you all so much, and yeah, on to the next session. Thanks, Scott and Eric.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you,
Appreciate it.
Eric.
Yeah, you too. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne.